By the late 19th century, Catholicism has become an extraordinarily centralized institution that had no precedent in Christian history. Page 61. Pope Leo XIII. The source of this video is from Absolute Power, a book by Paul Collins, and this is part 2 from Supreme Power to Supreme Pontiff. This is a summary of Chapter 3, Tackling a Whole New World. In 1878, Pius IX dies. On the 19th of February of the same year, 60 voting cardinals entered the Sistine Chapel for the papal conclave, since King Umberto I of Italy took the Quirinal Palace for his own residence. Only 25 of the 60 cardinals were non-Italian, so this shows that there was low representation of the entire church. Bishop of Perugia, Gioacchino Pecci, was perceived to be open to modernity and already at 68 would become a caretaker pope. Thus, he became Pope Leo XIII on the 20th. Despite wanting him to be a caretaker pope, he would hold office for 25 years and 5 months. Pope Leo XIII was thin, tall, aloof and intellectual, which was kind of the opposite to Pius IX, who was short and quite emotionally charged. Both popes, however, shared the ultramontanist perspective and continued to centralize the church. At first, however, Pecci was against modernity and had little awareness of the sociological changes pressing secularization forward, according to the theologian Bruce Duncan. Pope Leo XIII became committed to Catholic social welfare and social justice. He supported the sciences and the arts and advocated for the abolition of slavery. Meanwhile, in Italy, the Italian state espoused anti-Catholic sentiments after Pius IX's non-expedite of 1874 in the last chapter. In 1881 of July, a mob tried to toss Pius IX's corpse into the river Tiber when it was being moved to St. Lorenzo Fuori le Mura Basilica. Piedmontese bureaucrats had moved into Rome once it became the capital of Italy, and the meadows between Castel Sant'Angelo and the Vatican were sold off to them, as if making a statement against the papacy. Pope Leo XIII in May 1887 approached the Prime Minister Crispi in order to negotiate about the previous laws of guarantees, which was first given in 1871. The Pope wanted the restoration of the Papal States, so he refused the deal. Meanwhile, in Deutschland, in Germany, Leo XIII worked to resolve the Kulturkampf, an anti-Catholic culture battle which originated from the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, when Otto von Bismarck desired to create the liberal state bureaucracy of the Second Reich in Prussia. Bismarck was Protestant, and he did not trust Catholics, disliking the doctrine of the infallibility of the Pope, as well as the Zentrumspartei, or Catholic Center Party. And in 1872, when Bismarck wanted to forbid criticism of the government in all schools and churches. And also, Bismarck held further contempt for the church when in 1872 he forbade criticism of the government in all schools and churches, issued by pulpit law. In June of the same year, religious orders like the Jesuits were expelled from Germany, and diplomatic relations were suspended with the Vatican. The May Laws of Culture Minister Adalbert Volk of 1873 gave the government control over church affairs. Bismarck's efforts had the opposite effect in uniting and strengthening German Catholics. Over time, he required the support of Zentrumspartei in the Reichstag to oppose the Social Democrats, who were left-leaning. Bismarck slowly withdrew the anti-Catholic laws, and Catholics became a strong political force in Germany. Meanwhile, in France, the French lost the Franco-Prussian War. They also endured the rise and fall of the Paris Commune, which took away 40,000 lives. The Third Republic was established in 1875, and in 1882, the Education Minister Jules Ferry created free compulsory secular education, which took away church control of schools. Ferry was Laicite, or a militant secularist and a Freemason. He also expelled male religious orders like the Jesuits, stating that he wanted to organize humanity without God and without kings. Leo XIII was fluent in French and visited Paris before, being attracted to French culture, so he didn't condemn or protest against Ferry's policies. His encyclical Immortale Dei of 1885 stated that he allowed leeway for the people to have a share in the government, and he didn't condemn different government systems for so-called modern errors. After this encyclical, he wrote the encyclical Libertas in 1888, which allowed Catholics to participate in democracies. Both encyclicals are a complete reversal of the syllabus of errors by the prior Pope, Pius IX. However, this made French Catholic royalists cherry-pick what papal teachings should be followed, since this encyclical is antithetical to the syllabus. Ralliement, or the winning over of French Catholics by non-interference in French state affairs, did not please monarchist Catholics who wanted papal support and secularist Republicans who already disliked the Church. Back at home, Leo XIII still aspired for the restoration of the Papal States, while modern Italian Catholics were not sympathetic with this. Jesuit Carlo Cucci, who founded the La Civiltà Cattolica in 1877, called for reconciliation with Italy and for the papacy to accept the loss of the Papal States. As a result of this, Cucci's divinis, or priesthood, was suspended. The Pope supported the idea of the Church being the Societas Perfecta, a perfect society, which was affirmed in his encyclical Immortale Dei, where the Church trumped and was independent of the state. The encyclical Aeternis Patris of 1879 suggested that Thomas Aquinas' theology should be taught in Catholic universities, especially the idea that faith and reason are compatible. This caused controversy as not all theologians accepted Thomism. Letter on Historical Studies 1883 advocated for the study of original sources to historians, and Pope Leo XIII allowed selected scholars like Pope historian Ludwig von Pastor to study in the Vatican secret archives. History had an apologetic role in strengthening the faith against the anti-Catholic historians. The Pope then wrote Providentissimus Deus, 1893, an encyclical that advocated for Catholics to use critical methods to study the Bible but cautioned the use of higher criticism, that is, the questioning of the origin, literary structures, and the authors of the Bible. The Pontifical Biblical Commission of 1902 was set up to guide biblical scholars. The Church abroad. As you may know, this is well into the period of European expansionism and colonialism. Missionary expansion went along with European imperialism, and this caused evangelism and nationalism to blur. Missionary activity by today's historians are accused of destroying the local cultures. But, however, the missions and religious orders allowed for improvements in healthcare, literacy rates, and education, as well as a means to overcome dehumanizing tribal hierarchies. Many missionaries were made up of men and women from France, as well as other European nations like Germany, Ireland, Spain, and Italy. 248 dioceses were created. Leo XIII recognized the growth of the Church in secular and democratic nation-states like Canada, the US, Australia, and New Zealand. This also increased the power of Roman papacy and micromanagement. Americanism was condemned. The US Catholics understood that the nature of the Church existed within certain socio-cultural contexts, that American division of Church and state and democracy can exist side by side with Catholics. Leo XIII was an ultramontanist who supported higher papal authority, which was the opposite of Americanism. Americanism originated from Isaac Thomas Hecker, a priest who founded the Mission Society of St. Paul. He believed in the Catholic faith and how it supported the American need for individualism and the need for community. He emphasized on the power of the Holy Spirit and individual experiences. This idea became popular among American Catholics, and it gained traction among individuals like Dennis O'Connell, who was the first rector of Rome's North American College, and the first rector of Catholic University of America, John J. Kenney, who believed that American separation of church and state should be a model for the rest of the universal church. Controversy, however, started when Archbishop of St. Paul, John Ireland, said, "The people is king now," towards clergymen when he visited France. Rome sent Archbishop Francisco Sartori to the US to investigate this, and the US hierarchy became unhappy having not been consulted about this appointment. After Hecker died, Walter Elliot wrote his biography in 1891, and the ideas spread to France in 1897, when it was translated. This angered the French Catholics who created the term Americanism, since they didn't believe American Anglos had anything to offer the French. Testem Benevolentia, 1899 of January. The encyclical was addressed to Cardinal Gibbon of Baltimore, which condemned the notion that the church should change with the times to attract more believers, an idea espoused by Hecker and Americanism. The encyclical did little to halt the expansion of American Catholics, and the Pope just couldn't comprehend societal structure beyond that of paternal Italian culture. Industry and capitalism. Cardinal Manning, mentioned last video as an neo-ultramontanist, was a pivotal player in Catholic social justice in England. He had experience of working conditions and the exploitation of workers. He also supported agencies like the Salvation Army in fighting poverty, supported unions, democracy, state interventions in order to protect workers. Priest Edward McLean of St. Stephen's Church, Manhattan, called for state economic and social intervention to defend the rights of workers, and he encouraged parents to send their children to school, and supported Henry George, whom advocated for a single tax on land, which became the idea known as Georgism. McLean was accused of socialism/communism, and was suspended by the Archbishop. He refused to go to Rome and became excommunicated. After, in 1887, he founded the Anti-Poverty Society, and his priesthood was restored years after, in 1892, since his writings didn't counter church doctrine. Finally, the Pope introduced the encyclical Rerum Novarum of 1891, which became the basis of Catholic social teaching. There were three major ideas: absolute centrality of the common good as given by God, equity between capital and labor, and the central role of the state in regulating the relationship between these. The first major point condemns how the capitalist system exploits workers and forces them to undergo harsh working conditions. It also condemns usury, which is the use of exploitative interest rates, and it condemns a rich class of a few having all the wealth while masses labor like slaves. Rerum Novarum affirms private property, but also that it must be balanced with the needs of the common good, an idea founded by Aristotle, and a constant theme affirmed by the Hebrew prophets and Jesus, who were present with the marginalized and the poor. The encyclical emphasized how finding equity between capital and labor is important, as both capital and labor need each other to function, and how the amount of wages must be freely agreed upon, and they must meet the needs of the worker and their families. Finally, the government has a role in balancing these interests for the sake of the common good. Even though his policy and that of the Catholic Church may seem similar to socialism, this encyclical vehemently condemns class warfare and communism, affirming that human worth is reflected in the person of Jesus Christ, and his commitment to generosity, emphasis on morality, and the sanctity of life. Leo XIII died in July of 1903. He negotiated with the Italians, gave leeway to the French through Ralliement, expanded missionary activity, created modern Catholic social justice, fought against Americanism, and continued to centralize the church. Overall, he restored the church's reputation in the world. Join me next time for the reign of Pope Pius X. Thanks for watching.